And welcome back to the Young Dad Podcast. Whether you're outside grilling, mowing the lawn, changing dirty diapers, or maybe, just maybe, you got a moment to sit back, relax. I hope that's where you're at today. But whatever you're at, wherever you're doing, thank you for listening. Thank you for tuning in. Today, as you know, on the Young Dad Podcast, this is where we dive into the realities of fatherhood and mental health and the journey of becoming better men for ourselves and for our families. Today's guest is Patrick, Advanced Registered Nurse Practitioner, or ARNP, a personal coach, and a man who has been in recovery since the age of 19. Years of therapy and deep personal work, Patrick still struggled with self-hate, insecurity, and anger and worry until he discovered the missing piece that transformed his mindset and emotional well-being. As men, we can oftentimes struggle with these same things: self-hate, insecurity, anger, and worry. But that's where Patrick comes in. He now helps other men uncover and break free from self-destructive behaviors. And boys, we all have them. We all have them.
Mm.
So we all can experience better self-love, respect, and joy. So if you're a dad, if you're a husband, or even if you're just a dude, if you're just one of the bros and navigating inner struggles, this episode is for you. So let's jump into it. Patrick, welcome to the show.
Hey, Jay, thanks for having me on again. Good morning.
Of course, man. Excited to have you. So Patrick, your story's super powerful. So you got sober at 19, which is already a huge achievement. But even after that, years of therapy, spiritual work, you still felt like like that wounded kid inside. So can you take us back to kind of the moment at the live event where you admitted you didn't love yourself? Kind of take us back to um those defining moments, whether it's at 19, what made you get sober, and then kind of moments then on.
Yeah, so I guess we can go back to a couple years ago. So what was going on was I was about 19, 20 years sober. Life was overall good on the surface. I live in a great town here in Jupiter, Florida, near the beach. I have, great career, a lot of good friends. My family loves and adores me, especially because I got sober and kind of amended those relationships. Beautiful girlfriend, like really fun hobbies, do a lot of cool stuff. But there's just kind of something on the inside that was just kind of like not still kind of satisfied with me. So, and I couldn't, neglect that. I couldn't ignore that. It was always kind of there a little bit. And I started kind of having more anger issues that I hadn't had in a while, started kind of like popping off in traffic with patients I work with. I was getting kind of short tempered with. And, they may or may not have even noticed it, but I knew I wasn't kind of the genuine man I wanted to be, right? Like, I'm like, this isn't the kind of sober guy I thought I would be. And so my girlfriend was following a podcaster. She'd been doing some coaching work with her. She's over in Southern California. And she had this live event in October of 2022. And my girlfriend Caitlin's like, hey, I want to go to this event across country. Again, we're in Florida. She's like, I don't really know anybody there. Would you come with me and just kind of support me and be there with me? I'm like, yeah, sure, babe. I'll go check it out. Like, I'm sober, open-minded. Maybe I'll get some self-help stuff out of it, right? Like, I don't really know what I'm getting into. So we go to
Yeah,
the
you
event.
can't beat a trip to Southern California either. So I mean,
Man, it was exhausting. But yeah, going to Southern California, I'd never been to the West Coast before. So I'm like, hell yeah, let's go. Get a bunch of cool things accomplished at the same time. So we go. I have this great weekend, a bunch of breakthroughs. We do all these exercises and these dyads and dialogue things. And we pass around this microphone on the last day on Sunday to talk about what we got out of it. And we're passing the microphone around. And I'm holding the microphone in front of like 40 something people, this coach. And I'm just like, you know what? I realize I don't love myself still. Like I still feel broken on the inside. And I look over at Caitlin and I say, I want to love myself. I want to love me like you love me. And I know that I can't love you until I really deep down inside love myself to that extent. And I just started crying in front of this group of people. I didn't even know where this came from, but I got broken open. And she came up to me, the coach afterward, her name is JJ. And she said, this doesn't have to end like this. Whether you work with me or somebody else, you go back to Florida, don't just go back to your regular day-to-day life. Like carry this momentum forward, do something with this. And I said, hey, I'll do it with you. I don't know what that costs. I don't know what that looks like. I don't know how that works. I'm on the other side of the country, but let's go. Let's do it. Sign me up. So just like when I was 19 years old and got sent off to rehab, I was like, I had this immense relief of like, let's go. I want to start this new journey. I want to start this new chapter.
that's really cool. So what was that next chapter look like? What happened next?
So I did this like 6 month course with four other ladies and a guy. The guy ended up dropping out after about a couple months. It was just kind of, I think, too much for him. So we did this course where it was virtual like this, where we had virtual meetings, I think every 2 weeks. She gave us a bunch of exercises, things to do. And then we met in person, I think 3 or 4 times during the year. We met in Mexico one time. We met in California twice. We met somewhere else. I can't remember right now. So we met in person. So we had kind of like face-to-face touch type stuff. But then we kept in touch this way, and we had this really cool app on the phone called Marco Polo where you can leave video messages. So when something comes up in real time, Jay, which is really cool compared to therapy, when something comes up in real time, boom, you just hit it. You start talking about what's triggered you, what's going on, and then you get feedback from the group, from the coach pretty quickly within a few hours. So it's not like when I did therapy in my early 20s, something came up. I'm like, shit, all right, well, I can't see my therapist for 2 more weeks. And then by then it's kind of died down, right? And by then I'm talking for 50 minutes about my week, and then the time's up and I have to leave. So I got a lot more out of this, not to knock therapy whatsoever. That works for some people. For me, this was more effective. And she broke me open, and we got into a bunch of child core wound type of stuff. And with you having children, I don't have kids, but I have nieces and nephews, and I can see how they're affected by day-to-day stuff, the way that we program them and the way that they're affected by day-to-day circumstances. And me, I was affected by my parents and their relationship and alcohol and everything, right? So it was just like really cool stuff I did over those next 6 months. And then what happened more, I did a 12-month course with her, a business course about coaching. So that's kind of why you and I are talking today, is I wanted to get into coaching to help other men that were, in the same place where I was.
Interesting. No, I just love to hear the story, and kind of see what happened and how it happened and those defining moments. Because those defining moments are, the cornerstones of our foundation.
Yeah. It's like, poop or get off the pot, right?
Pretty much, pretty much. And so that's cool. That's really cool. And
Yeah.
then it turned into wanting to give back and help other men through it. Because, you know, as men, we're not taught these things, right? We're not given the opportunity to learn these things. We're not taught these things. Hence why there was a 4 to 2 ratio in, the actual coaching session, and then it became a 4 to 1 ratio because it probably was just too much for that one guy. It's
Yeah.
like, whoa, I'm not cut out. This is not whoa, it's not it. But it's really interesting. The one part that interests me is the Marco Polo. I have a buddy that uses that app, but his the way he uses it, and dude, I'm so sorry. If he's listening and he knows, I'm not gonna say his name, but I love you, dude. You know you're one of my best friends. He's like literally one of my best friends. And we've been best friends since college, so we've been friends for a better part of a decade now. And I feel so bad to bring this up, but I'm not gonna say his name. So he's divorced, and he's used Marco Polo, at least to my knowledge, for for that purpose of like videos.
Hmm.
But after they've made like their initial connection on like dating apps and stuff, and then it moves to Marco Polo kind of
Okay.
thing as like a video, like a safe like video kind of back to back kind of thing versus like texting or things like that, to where it's like a more secure kind of platform, sending videos, things like that. Make sure the other person's like not catfish, pretty much.
Yeah, it's like it's video messaging basically. You're like leaving a voicemail or a text message, but it's a video of you talking. So, and then it's
Yeah,
it's saved forever, basically.
yeah, yeah. And his purpose is a little different because he's dating and things like that. But hey, I still love him. So I sure hope he doesn't listen to this. This will probably be the one he's like, oh, I want to listen to that one. No, don't.
Just tell them it was a total disaster. It's not worth it.
Just stop at around 8 minutes. Just stop 8 minutes in. Just give it
Yeah,
up.
yeah.
But no, that's really interesting. So I work in mental health, and kind of hearing that, it's like, huh. What if we created something like that, or what if we just encourage like clients to record themselves like in the moment, right? So when they start to feel those things, and they can just bring those with them to their next appointment, or they can email those things over. That may flood inboxes and things like that. So it may be easier to just bring those things over because maybe that week you're meeting with your counselor, your therapist, there nothing happened, right? And you're feeling better. But then you forget to talk about those 3 things that may have come up in the last, 3 weeks since you last met, kind of thing. So I think that would be a really cool tool to incorporate because
It's
then you're
helpful when
yeah,
you're kind of primed up. You're kind of like, the fire's going or whatever's going on. That motion's like at its peak. It's important to just blah, get it out.
yeah. No, and even if you get it out and maybe it's not addressed until you have your appointment, you still got it out and it's recorded, so now you can address it. Then you
Mhm.
can address where it's coming from, why you're having it, behaviors linked to it, things like that, and kind of deep dive into it. So that would be a better use of therapy and your therapy time and whatnot versus just going and talking about your week. So
And the cool part about it was like you could see the progression because like a lot of people, especially if they're struggling with like stuff I was like insecurity, low self-esteem, a lot of self-doubt, and your video recording yourself talking, you feel uncomfortable, like, you know, how do I look? Am I sitting upright? How's my hair? How's the stuff behind me? Like, how's my voice sound? So you see the progression from the insecurity to where like then eventually you're just leaving messages like you're sending one to a friend. You don't worry about all that other stuff. So you can see the progression of how somebody, and I saw it in my group with the ladies in my group too, about how everybody got more comfortable over time doing it and like less insecure. So it's really cool progression with that aspect too.
That is really cool. That is cool. So men, right, in general, there's everything we're talking about is so pertinent for men. Having to do things that are uncomfortable is normally a quick, I'm not going to do that. The thought of
Mm-hmm.
being uncomfortable is like, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm gonna find something that's in my comfort zone. Like I kind of mentioned too, I alluded to it earlier, but we're often taught to push through pain, suppress emotions, and quote unquote man up. But that can lead to self-destructive habits. That can lead to addictions. That can lead to intense anger issues. That can lead to poor quality relationships or low quality, poor quality.
I
Either
would
one
say
of those.
both. Yeah.
Both, right? Low
I would
and
say
poor
both. Yeah.
quality. Different relationships may have a different spin, but overall, it's not good, right? And so for you, what have you learned about the root cause of these patterns in your own life and in the men you coach?
So it all, again, like it all came down to childhood trauma. And for me, my traumas might not sound like trauma to somebody else and vice versa, right? It might be like, you think that was abuse or you think that was traumatic, but we all have our ingrained perception of what our trauma and abuse was, right? Like I grew up with two younger sisters. They may or may not have experienced the same things that I did, or at least in the same way. So for me, that shaped the way that I have relationships. And like, yeah, I'm like your friend. I was divorced too. So I was married for a while, got divorced and get back in the dating game. And now I've been in a really tremendous, awesome relationship for the last 8 years, And like I vowed not to make those mistakes. So the stuff I learned as a child, I carried into my first marriage. A lot of the cold stone silence, slamming doors, like, threatening behaviors, not actually hitting her, but just kind of like intimidating power kind of stuff, right? But it all came from a place of insecurity and struggle. And so a lot of the childhood stuff that I learned, it was like I figured out why I get triggered and like, the fact that I don't accept compliments and I always deflect things and I make excuses for things instead of people just saying, "Hey man, you did a great job, Pat," or "Hey man, it's a nice shirt you're wearing, Pat." Like, "Yeah, but it's this," or "Yeah, but it's that." I would always minimize things, right? Why? Because I didn't love myself. I didn't accept those things about myself. Once I did this work and started loving myself, I started beginning to say thank you when people would give me compliments. Thank you, I appreciate that. And just that little change of many things that I did was huge. I started showing other people I love myself. I started carrying myself a little differently. People were saying, "Something's different about you. Are you on medications or something? Like what's going on? Like things are different, right?" And so like the whole thing was that I've always helped people in substance abuse for the last, 22 years now that I've been sober. And so as a nurse practitioner, I've been working in substance abuse for 7 years, but now I can do this work with everyday people who may not have addictions and substance abuse problems. And that's what I want to do is help other men like me who struggle with being vulnerable, like you said, repress, push everything down. And then what happens? I'm like a pot of boiling water just ready to tip over. So you cut me off in traffic, that's the shoelace that breaks. I explode, right? And we all know it has nothing to do with that incident. It's a lot of other stuff that carried underneath. And for me, it was a lot of childhood stuff. So I learned all my core wounds that happen when I get triggered, how I respond, and the emotions tied to them. So now, if somebody triggers me, Jay, and I'm doing my day to day life, somebody triggers me, I go, "Oh, okay. That's that little kid that's feeling neglected or feeling defective or feeling like something's wrong with him because he didn't get the right kind of attention from his mother or he got physically abused or whatever the case was." So like it's not blame. It took me out of victim mentality, gave me self-knowledge, and then she gave me a lot of cool things to do to reverse those things. Like mirror mantras and gratitude lists, appreciation lists, and the stuff I was saying about, accepting compliments from people. She gave me this really cool thing where she told me every day when I come home, compliment myself to Caitlin. So I would come home and Caitlin go, "Okay, so what's your compliment for today?" And I'd be like, "Okay, I did a good job at work with something," right? And so I got more comfortable with doing those kind of like positive things. And so I started to change from this, like you said, poor, low quality relationships. Well, that was with myself, with Patrick. So I started to change that into and got on like a more positive vibration. And then what happens? All this really cool shit starts coming to me. All these cool things start happening, cool people, cool events. And it's like, well, of course, I got on a positive wavelength, so I started attracting positive things. So it's pretty simple as far as that part goes.
That's awesome. That's awesome. what was I gonna say? The analogy that you gave of the boiling pot. It's funny that you mentioned that one because that's the one I use all the time
Yeah.
in my work. All the time when I'm talking to parents about, especially if the kid has really a lot of anger problems, or if the parent also feels reactive a lot of the time. I give that analogy all the time. So I'm just like, huh, I use that one too.
Yeah. It's so common.
Yeah, it's super common and it's easy to understand too, right? And we want to go from, always being at boiling to where the lid's kind of shaking and the water's about to, pop over. We want to be able to lower that just a little bit to a simmer, right? And then to just where the bubbles are starting to form. And then we want to lower the temperature a little bit, get it down a little bit more, and we just want to keep lowering that temperature, right? I don't think the temperature ever gets down to truly zero, but we can get down to one at least. We can get down pretty low over time
Right. And you can't
with
do
enough
it all at
work.
once. You can't go way up here all the way down here. You have to go, like you said, gradually, step by step by step.
Yeah, and it's a lot of it, like you're saying here. You're totally right here. Like a lot of it does stem from one's childhood, or it does stem from one's experiences, or it stems from just one's day to day. Their day to day life it can be difficult to accept those things and understand those things and want to fix any of those things because those things are hard. Those things are scary to dive into, and that's okay. They're supposed to be. And as men, we live kind of on that edge of, okay, well, I'm doing fine. But nothing's happened lately. But then someone cuts us off as traffic, as you mentioned, then boom, explode. Right? It's so common, and it's not where you want to live. It's not where you want to be in your day to day. It's not where you want to be all the time. You don't want to be on that edge because that edge can be really dangerous.
Well, we repress things as men, right? It's like you said, like depression. I think a lot of times depression is just repressed emotions and feelings, and also
Absolutely.
lack of purpose. People who don't have purpose are depressed. So what we do, like when we get clean and sober, we start helping other people. It helps that depression because now we have a little bit of purpose in our life, and so we carry that forward. Like the clients that you work with and the families, it's like got to find some purpose. And as men, we're fixers. We want to fix everybody and everything, and it can drain us. It can destroy us if we're not
Yeah,
careful.
absolutely. No, and men especially need purpose. Men need that purpose more than anyone else. Every little boy, every young man, teenager, adolescent, everyone in between, from adult to a small child. If they're boys, they absolutely need some kind of purpose. They need something to look forward to every single day to keep them going. Because that's what's going to motivate them to, have that good behavior or to work on the things because they know they still get that thing that they really care about, right? Maybe that's baseball, maybe that's football, maybe that's some kind of sport, maybe that martial arts, maybe that's, I don't know, maybe it's just being able to write a book, or maybe that's being able to work on something or play with something for specific kind of thing, right? And that motivation has to stay there because that's what that little boy or what's that man's looking for. That's their whole purpose.
Well,
That's
that's
what they're
masculine. That's masculinity. That's masculine energy is all about purpose driven. Feminine energy is about love and support, and masculinity is about purpose. And so, obviously, men generally are going to have more masculine energy. And so, when we don't have purpose, we flounder. And our woman's like, "What's wrong with you? Why aren't you the man you used to be?" And da da da. You kind of let yourself go. You get complacent, and then as men, we get agitated, and then we start blaming her and blaming the job and the boss and all this stuff because we're not aligned with what our purpose is. And as kids, I mean, it was cool as hell. I would go with my dad on the weekends with his landscaping, and I'd go as a little kid ride around the pickup truck with my dad and go pick up sticks. And then as I got older, now I could weed eat, and then I could edge, and then I could mow, and that gave me like purpose. And I would get a little bit of allowance, probably give me a couple dollars. Like that made me feel useful, and I was purposeful, right? It's like you said, and being
exactly.
and being the oldest sibling, I could help with the little siblings, and I could do chores, and I would get a little bit of an allowance, like I said. And then like that made me feel purposeful. They got me into sports when I was like 4 years old. So I played sports from like 4 years old to 19 the entire time. So I had the camaraderie. I knew what it was like to like be a part of a team. Like that was all helpful stuff. But in my childhood, I still had the trauma and the abuse that I kind of like internalized and felt responsible for. So somewhere along the way, I got the message that like I'm responsible for everybody's feelings. I'm responsible for everybody being happy and okay. And when they're not, it's my fault. And then I internalize it. So nobody told me that. Nobody ever told me that. That's just what I ingrained in me and took out into the world as an adult. Started causing havoc. So I had to learn from that.
That's so common, right? Especially with oldest children. That's very common.
Yeah.
To where they just take on everybody else's stuff, and if they can't fix it, then it's their fault for not being able to fix it, or their fault for not being able to make the situation better in some way, shape, or form. So they feel responsible for everyone around them a lot of times, which is double-edged sword in itself. We've mentioned substance abuse a few times here, and I feel for men, a lot of these things we're talking about, suppressing the emotions, the self-destructive habit, lead to that substance abuse, and so these two things go hand in hand. That substance abuse, that's the chicken is all the repressed stuff, right? Is all the trauma. The egg is the substance abuse, and you can't ask, did the chicken or the egg comes first? Because the trauma happened and the things happened to you before you started, whatever substance it was. And so, how do you help men kind of balance both or work through both? Because they oftentimes do go hand in hand. At least I think they do.
Yeah. No, for sure, for sure. I mean, there's a reason why at like 10 years old, a fun Friday night for me was going around with my friends and like finding little cigarette butts in the shopping plazas and smoking those, like, to get a nicotine buzz. Like, there's a reason why at young age I was seeking something to numb myself and escape. Subconsciously, I didn't know that's what I was doing. So men today are doing the same thing. Maybe they're working way too many hours, gambling, maybe promiscuity, infidelity, like all those things, adrenaline junkies. Like, again, it doesn't have to be drugs and alcohol. Because, again, as you know, a lot of people get clean and sober and then they just trade one addiction for another. Maybe they're like working out 2 hours a day, 7 days a week at the gym now that they're sober. Like, it's all about replacing things. So it's about figuring out, for me at least, how can I sit still, be quiet with myself, do I have a connection with some kind of belief in a higher power? Like, is that helping fulfill me, fill that hole? Because basically, I'm trying to fill this hole my entire life. I'm trying to, my friend says it's like when we're born and the doctors cut the umbilical cord, we run around trying to plug that umbilical cord into everything we can. We're trying to get that connection back that we had as a baby, as a fetus. So we're always trying to find something to make us feel whole. So what can I do to make me feel whole without something external that I'm having to do or put in my body. So it's difficult. It's a difficult task. So it's definitely figuring out, you know, underneath what's really going on. That's why I ask guys, what's really going on? Like, you said this about your job. You said this about the way your wife, is really nagging at you. Like, what's really going on though? Or, oh, you're craving a drink after you're sober X number of months or years. What's really going on? You're not just randomly craving a drink. Like, something's going on. And so it's about helping that person, helping them turn their gaze over to like what it is. Or maybe it's like being in the dark and you're helping them shine a flashlight on what this monster is. And then when you shine the flashlight on it, it's like this tiny little insect. It's not as big as you thought it was because it was in the dark.
Yeah, that's a good point. And so so outside of, substance use and maybe some of these poor quality relationship and some of the other things you may have mentioned, are there any other ways that some of those like little bugs manifest them in our day-to-day lives for men? That self-hate, those insecurity bugs, how do they manifest in our day-to-day lives so that we can start to maybe recognize some of those?
So for me, again, well, all I have is my experience that I can carry forward, right? So for me, it was a lot of the self-talk. Anytime I made a mistake, you stupid idiot, you know better than that. What the hell are you doing, right? So it's about the self-love stuff. So it's about being aware of judgment when I'm judging other people. When I find myself, oh, this son of a bitch is talking again. Oh, I don't want to really talk to this patient again. This patient's always complaining about this and that. So it's like being aware when those start to come up, what's going on with me? Why? Because obviously I'm putting out what is going on with me right now. Because when I'm not judging you and carrying on my life really well, I'm feeling good about myself. When I'm not feeling good about myself, I'm judging you and every single person I come in contact with and being very overly critical. So I have to watch myself when I'm doing that, towards myself, and I have bodily uh signals that I can pay attention to if I'm in tune with my body. My chest might get a little tight, my breathing might get a little constricted. I don't take those nice deep cleansing breaths. Maybe I'm not congested, but like constricted here in my chest. Maybe I feel it in my stomach. I feel those kind of nerves going in my stomach. So it's about being aware of what is going on with me so that I don't affect other people negatively. Because that's really what ultimately ends up happening is I turn it in on myself.
Makes sense. Yeah, it does always turn inwards a lot of the time. Um, but we still struggle with those things. With the other, I'm like trying to think and talk at the same time. 10 out
It
of
can
10
be
do not
tough.
recommend. Try to
It can be
talk
tough.
before you think, right? Don't talk before you think. Think before you talk. Oh my God, my grandma used to try to pound that into me all the time, but here I am doing it. So we still struggle with that self-worth though at the end of the day, right? Like it
Oh yeah.
still manifests itself every day, even if we have external success, career, relationships, and sobriety. So is there any other ways that we can specifically deal with this, or things that you've done to specifically deal with it that are helpful to kind of redirect some of that, or to get some of that out, or to work through it? Because like you mentioned, you were sober for a long time, you had a good job, good relationship, like on the outside Patrick is doing fine. Any other dude will look at you and be like, "Oh, Patrick, you're doing fine, dude. Look at you. Great girlfriend. You've been together for a while now. Oh, your job's going good. You've been sober still all these years. Like, dude, you're doing great." Kind of thing. That's very common. Very common with most men. Especially if they're struggling with something, they'll work even harder and they'll redirect the energy to work. But to
Hmm.
actually heal from that, how can we break some of those struggles or break some of those like cycles for ourselves?
Well, for me, I figured out, what are the needs that I have, right? Like, so I have needs. We all have needs. Sometimes they're being met, sometimes they're not being met. So like when I'm getting in that, like you said, overwork mode, overstress mode, what's the need that I have? A lot of times the need that I have is space. I just need some space. I need some space away from people, some independence. Like you said, you got the kids, the family. Sometimes I just need that couple hours where I can just be alone and think, or just be alone and do a little bit of casual work. So it's about figuring out what is my need and then how do I get that need met? So I have a feeling, which is anxiety, stress, anger, frustration, whatever the case is, and then I have a need that's not being met. So, right. So, what's the need that's not being met? And then the third step, how do I get that need met? But the hard part, Jay, is how do I get that need met without making you or somebody else do anything different or be different, right? Because then I'm taking the power back. I'm not in the victim mode anymore. So, finding out how to not be a victim in life is the really big part. And for me, there's a lot of things. I could do this appreciation journal that I do in the morning where I just go down the list. I write I appreciate at the top, and then I just list things all the way down, right? My sobriety, I have all my extremities, I have a driver's license, I have a motorcycle, I live near the beach, I have a great girlfriend, I have great friends, I have a higher power. I go all through the list, right? And then the other cool part I do is at the top, I write down like 3 to 5 things that I'm looking forward to, right? Like I'm looking forward to my sister and brother-in-law coming down from Tennessee next week. Looking forward to going to a concert this summer. I'm looking forward to getting married in July, which has happened, right? My
Cheers.
fiance and I, thanks, man, are getting married. I'm looking forward to going to Italy. And then I write down some things that maybe aren't in the calendar to come up that maybe I want to manifest. So I'm looking forward to some other couple things, right? And so I do that. So I do what I appreciate and then things I'm looking forward to. And so it gets me out of that mindset of I gotta go to work today and man, I gotta do like this and this, and I gotta like after that, I gotta go over here and there. So it's difficult, right? Like because we all have, like you said, we all have self-doubt, we all have self-worth issues that come up from time to time. I have a boxing tournament coming up in 3 weeks, and like I have no reason to think that like I'm gonna struggle and lose and have complications, but like it's still that internal like, oh man, I doubt, like, oh, what if I don't do good? And that doesn't change who I am. I'm still a 42-year-old nurse practitioner who's living a kick-ass life. I'm doing amateur boxing. It doesn't mean anything ultimately. It's cool to do it and to step in the ring and have the experience. I have 4 fights under my belt. I've only lost one out of 4 fights. So like, why do I still have the doubt that says, well, what if? What if I don't? It's like, well, what if I win? What if I have awesome support, and what if I get to like have a really good three round match, and me and the other guy do the best that we can as 40+ year old guys, like whatever. It's
Right.
fun. It's a fun thing. It's just glorified sparring basically, but it's a lot of fun. So there's those things that come up that I have to battle with, right? Well, I shouldn't say battle with, that I can learn how to deal with, because I don't want to
Hmm.
fight anymore. I don't want to battle with these things anymore. So it's like, yeah, I talk to some people about it, but I don't over talk about it, because if I talk about the negativity too much, I start living in the negativity. So I don't want to complain all the time. I want to like one or two people and then redirect it to something positive and forward. You know what I mean?
Gotcha. No, I hear you. I hear you. And that's, part of your emotional healing, right?
Yeah, big time.
Your sobriety was one thing, but getting your healing emotionally was another. What are some of those things that beyond, the negative talk and the negative patterns and whatnot, what else did you have to unlearn as you went through this process over the last few years? Like what
Well,
kind of things have you had to unwind like in your head that were, those kind of I want to say coils, right? Those coils that are just like really smushed. How did you uncoil those a little bit?
yeah, I think, a lot of the stuff I already knew that kind of helped me better now that I did some of the more emotional healing, which was like, not being paranoid that people are thinking bad things about me or thinking that I look weird or I sound weird, like kind of like giving people the benefit of the doubt, basically, like not prejudging, like I said, that somebody, the way they look or act, that like I need to be concerned in some kind of way, and not take things personal is the biggest one, right? Because if a patient or a staff member, somebody's attacking me, it's not about me. It's not about you, Patrick. And that was the big thing I learned. And you know that very well working in mental health. It's I can look at it now and go, man, you're really hurting. You have a lot of trauma. Like you're really, really hurting right now. And I had this incident yesterday with a client at the drug and alcohol rehab center. And I was just looking at him going, man, this guy is like really, really in a lot of pain because he's taking it out on literally everybody in this building right now. And it's like, how can I help this person see that? And some people are just not at that place yet where they can see that. So I don't know if I answered your question, but it's about kind of figuring out, how can I be more basically positive, but in some respects, it's not like I can just wake up in the morning and like in a false cheery way say I'm going to be positive today and just whistle my way out of bed. I have to take actions, right? And you already know the thoughts, will eventually follow the actions. If I take the actions, even though I don't know what this has to do with feeling better, what does this have to do with staying sober? I take the actions that people told me to take, and then my thinking eventually starts to improve a little bit over time, right? Like I can't go, like I said, I can't go from super depressed and full of anxious and fear down here to happy, joyous, and free up here. You got to uncoil, so it's a little step by step. So maybe I go from super depressed to like, okay, well, maybe I can shower today. Maybe I can eat a meal or two today. Maybe I can like, pick up that really 500-pound heavy phone and call somebody today. So like step by step, I start uncoiling it. And then eventually, before you know it, now I'm at that happy, joyous, and free and love myself. And I don't flick myself off in the mirror anymore. And I love the guy that I see looking back at me. So that's a really cool process.
Yeah, no, and it's a great process, and it's an identity shift, right?
Yeah.
Especially through sobriety. But then for you, it sounds like you had an additional identity shift within that, right? You
Yeah.
got sober, which is already something huge. It's a huge identity shift in itself. But beyond that, you had another identity shift. And I think a lot of men are afraid of shifting these parts of their identity. It's not that they don't want to, right? I feel like a lot of men want to make these shifts. They want to make these changes, whether it's getting sober or whether it's getting healthy mentally and emotionally and physically, right? Like we want to make these changes, but we're afraid of, giving up the person we want to do. And like you mentioned a couple of times, that's where a higher power comes in. I'm Christian, so that would be, that's the metaphor right there of giving up the old self for the new self,
Yep.
right?
Rebirth. Yep.
Letting your old self die so that you can step into the new self that the creator wants you to be, essentially. So it's an identity shift, and you can't be afraid of that. Like you're allowed to be afraid of that, but you can't let those chains, tie you down. Because that new identity, that new person, the stuff that's on the other side of that fear are some of the best things in life in general.
Yep. You do it anyways.
Especially if yeah. Yeah. Were you afraid to take that new job? Probably. Were you afraid to commit to buy that house? Probably. Were you afraid to commit to say I do on your wedding day? Probably. There's probably a little bit there. Even if you say you're like 100% sure, there's probably still like, 1%. It's common. It's not uncommon. So, we have to be okay with shifting our identity because our identity shifts constantly. We go from being a boyfriend to a fiance to a husband. We go from being not a father to a dad. We go from being a dad of one to being a dad of two. We go from being an uncle to, uncle with one niece to three nieces sometimes. Our identity shifts constantly when it's out of our control. And that's okay. Our identity shift is supposed to shift. It's supposed to change as we get older, as we mature, as we go through life, our identity changes. And that's okay. There's nothing wrong with that. But some of these identities, these self identities, we have to change them ourselves. Because there's people looking to us for that identity shift to be the best version of ourselves that we can be. And a lot of times, especially for kids, they'll follow that example to a T.
Yeah.
Whether it's if you're dad and you have sons, they'll follow that to a T because that's how they'll be. If it's a daughter, they will look to find someone as they get older who emulates you physically, emotionally, and mentally, right? So you gotta take a good long look in the mirror sometimes and be like, whew, I don't think I want that kind of thing. And so it's just just some thought there, some fruit for thought. Are there any, speaking of, recovery here, I love talking about recovery. I've had some really great podcast episodes with people who work in the recovery space, whether through social work, whether through going through it themselves, whether as psychologists or whatnot. So I love the topic of recovery. Having been myself a child with addict biological mother, this is a near and dear topic to my heart. So for you though, any common myths about addiction and recovery that need to be debunked, especially like around men and whatnot, in your opinion?
I mean, it's hard to say because it seems like probably in like the last 20 years, it's so more, well known, right? Because like you gave voice to, probably everybody we know in our lives has somebody that they love and care about that's affected by addiction, right? Whether they're the relative, a friend, a spouse, or addicted themselves, like almost everybody. And so I think it's kind of things have kind of seemed to move away from, but maybe it's still there for some people. Like you're just a bad person. You're just a selfish, con man. Like you make it all about you. Like if you loved the kids, you would stop drinking. If you loved your wife, you would stop doing the drugs. If you loved your parents, you would stop gambling. So like the understanding that it is a disease, which has been since what the 40s or 50s, that it's been known as in the American Medical Association as a disease, addiction, that, it is a disease, but it's not an excuse. It's not a crutch. I get so many patients that we saw them, treated them, sent them home or sent them to the next phase. A week later, months later, a couple years later, they end up back. And I'm like, what happened? Like, well, I'm just an alcoholic. And I'm like, no, that's BS. No, 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 no. That's an excuse. What happened? What did you stop doing? Where did you get complacent? You basically quit taking your medicine, right? You quit taking your spiritual medicine is what happened. And so what happens? Your cancer relapses, right? You quit taking your cancer medication. You quit taking your diabetes medication. Now you have, from your diabetes. So you quit taking your spiritual medicine in recovery. What happens? You go back to your default, which is I need something to numb this. I need something to fill this hole because this hole that I had filled with spiritual and recovery things is now starting to gape open because I quit doing what was working. And so now what do? I have to put those things back in there. Even though they don't fit right, they fill that hole just temporarily, maybe for a couple minutes, maybe for a couple days. So helping them kind of see that is helpful. So I don't know if there's a whole lot of myths anymore. Like I said, I mean, with all the intervention shows, the Osbournes that were on like 15, 18 years ago, it's like, rehab almost like became like a fad, right? So many celebrities started being public about going to rehab. So it seemed like, I think it's like a really good thing in some ways because a lot more people are being helped, but also in some ways, people that maybe don't need help are ending up in these places too, because like, their family's kind of freaking out because they had one or two episodes or something like that. But, hopefully they can get some help out of it and they can learn and maybe not go back to that, even if they're not addicted. Maybe it was just, again, they have a major mental health issue. Like you said, like, is it the mental health or is it the substance abuse? Which one came first? So, as you know, a lot of people are dual diagnosis. They have multiple things going on. So I don't know. I don't know if there's like a lot of myths about disease any longer.
No, I think you're right too. And I think the biggest thing is, not believing the person, right? I think that's the biggest part, or not even believing yourself that you have a problem. And there's so much justification to a means, right? Like the ends to a justification. Like there's, oh well, I just do this to get some relief, or I just do this to after a long day, or I just do this because of this, or this is because of this. And then there's also the, oh yeah, well, you look like you got everything together on the outside. Like you're
Hmm.
fine, kind of thing. I think those are the two biggest things, right? You people either not believing you or you not believing yourself that you actually have a problem and finding a justification to a mean. I don't think it's a myth. I think it's definitely something that's a barrier to acceptance, right? Because you got to accept.
Yeah,
That's the first part. You got to accept that you have a problem. You got to accept that you have an addiction. You got to accept that something's wrong before you can fix anything. You can't
it's
just go about your day to day.
it's so much denial. Like I have clients sitting in front of me. They're like, "Oh yeah, I'm just here for 5 days or 7 days to detox, and I'm going right back home." I'm like, "That's a horrible idea." Like you don't know what kind of fragile state you're going to be in after 7 days, because then, the medicines we've been giving you to replace the alcohol or the benzos or the opiates and fentanyl, those are going to start wearing off out of your body over the next week or two. Then you're going to have post-acute withdrawal symptoms, and you think you're going to be at home being a good husband and father and going to work every day. Like, it's going to be a struggle. And what happens is often, again, it's not, I always tell, look, it's not a guarantee, but statistically, you're going to do better if you stay a little bit longer. Even if if you think you're not going to get anything out of doing therapy and groups and medications, just more time away from the substance in your day-to-day life is going to greatly benefit you for when you get back home. And I just know that was for me. I spent 46 days in rehab at 19 years old, but
Wow.
dang it, after 5 days or a week, it was like, I need to get back home and, be a good brother and be a good son. And, I got to try to get that ex-girlfriend back and show her what a good guy I am, like all those things, right? And people are like, slow down, man, slow down. Those aren't going anywhere, because if you go back home and you relapse, it was all for nothing. Especially the fact that you were shooting up heroin, that's kind of like a next level type of stuff. You're probably going to die if you leave here and go back, because if they say this is a progressive disease, you're going to
Hmm.
not are you going to pick up where you left off, you're going to pick up past that where you left off. You're going to be way advanced in your use when you go back to using. So stay here, learn about yourself, build a recovery network. And what happened was 10 years went by and I ended up never going back home. I would go home for holidays and visit, but I never went back home to live. I listened to other people who had my best interest instead of listening to Patrick and all his, harebrained ideas and schemes. Those schemes got me into rehab at 19 years old. So, like, why am I going to listen to myself just because I'm a week sober now, right? So it's about helping people get through that denial, man, because they're always like, oh, I'll be fine. Look, I know you. And they say to me all the time, I know you hear this all the time, but I know you hear this all the time, but I'm
But
going to be fine. But I know you hear this all the time, but like, man, just short-term inconvenience for the long-term payoff. I tell them right now, it's going to be inconvenient. It's going to suck. I know you're worried about your job and all this and that and the family, but like, those aren't going to be there if you go back to drinking or drugging anyways. So do it right this time.
and sometimes you only get one shot at that, right? Sometimes you only get one shot. And I like that you mentioned that it's a progressive disease. I think that's been highlighted very well on this podcast, to where I've had a couple lawyers that were on the podcast, one in North Carolina. He was very successful, right? Very successful. But, you know, we broke it down, and I don't think I was able to get him to admit he had a gambling addiction, but more or less, he agreed that there was some parts of an addiction there. But that progressed, right? Where it progressed to like, okay, now, we're all lending money to each other. The money, the money, the money. It was, yeah, I owe this person money. I owe this person money. Now I'm in deeper. Now I'm in deeper. We're drinking, we're smoking, we're having fun, we're having a good time, we're doing all these things and blah, 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 blah. And it was just like a cycle, 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 cycle. And we were breaking down that cycle. I don't know if he ever had it broken down for him. He's a smart dude, really smart. I'm sure he had. But the way we broke it down, it felt like it was a different kind of conversation for him because I was really poking and prodding at those different parts of his story,
Yeah.
and he was totally into it. He was totally cool with it. And we had a great conversation. So shout out to you, James. You're great, man. That episode came out a few weeks before this one. If I'm thinking of dates and numbers and things right. So, but where was I? His spiral of addiction just continued and continued and continued to where he got to the point to where he's robbing a bank. He's a very successful African American lawyer in North Carolina, and then boom, robs a bank. Then spends many, many years in prison because of this choice. And then boom, comes out, pulls his life together, then becomes a preacher, right? And I feel like those dudes that go through stuff like that, those are the best freaking preachers there are. Those are the
Yeah.
best ones that there can be, because they understand all the sides of the struggle. They understand the depths of God, and they understand the depths of His love and His forgiveness and His grace and everything so much more than the average person. Because this dude was in the throes of addiction, gambling addiction. There's other things along the way that he mentioned, whether it was they would drink, they would smoke, they would party, they would stay up late. There was some, I think, I don't know if we got into it, so I can't spell for sure if there was any like promiscuity or anything like that along the way. But who knows? There could have been. And yeah, it was just one of those stories. And then there's another one, same thing. Just the money, the things that get to you, right, and they lead you down these paths. And it can be very destructive, very, very destructive, very self-destructive. And it
Sometimes insidious, you don't even see it coming.
exactly, you don't see it coming. You're just having, that's what I'm saying, the justification here, right? There's a justification. We're just having fun. We're just having a good time. It's really not that serious.
Not
We're
hurting
just having a good
anybody.
not hurting anybody. It's just me and my buddies. We're having a good time, and then boom, rob the bank at gunpoint one day. So the
What?
whole
Where did that come from?
he the thing is, his story is so cool because he almost got away with it because he was so prominent and he was so well known that when he got pulled over, the cop, like, who knew him already, was like, "You doing okay, man? You look a little off." And he was like, "Oh, yeah, man, I'm just not feeling good. I'm just trying to go home and get some rest," kinda thing. And he was so close to getting away. He was so close to getting away with it. It's crazy because he was that well known, right? And then because he already knew why he was getting pulled over, he's like, "Oh, this is it. This is it." It's a very good episode. It'll come out, it doesn't come out for a while from our recording right now. We're in end of February. So that comes out, I wanna say sometime in April, I wanna believe. So hang on tight for that one. So it'll come out a few weeks before this one, but that
Cool.
one's a really good
Yeah,
one.
that sounds
I love
good.
that. But anyways, I digress here. But it just goes to show, like, that path, it goes from one choice to one choice, and then all of a sudden you're downhill quick one day, and you just kinda wake up, and that's kinda where you're at. But anyways, I digress here. Uh,
Well, one day you look in the mirror and you're like, how did this happen? Where did this come from? Because for so long it was like, I just thought like, this is just the way it is. This is just my life. I would just look in the mirror from time to time and have some of those like aha moments where it's like, this is just the way it is. Maybe I'll grow out of this. Maybe I'll die from this. I don't know. It's just the way it is. And so it was difficult to kind of figure out, because for me, it was like, it took 6 months, Jay, for me to like, well, I didn't even ask for help. I was trying for 6 months to ask for help. Like, how do I break this to my parents? How do I let them down gently? Like, maybe I'm doing something different, not shooting heroin. Like, how do I tell them, like, I'm still having the drinking problem they knew about, or I'm just popping pills? Like, how do I break it to them? And it took them coming home and finding me passed out on the couch with needle, spoon, heroin, belt around my arm and thinking I was dead. Like, that's what it took because I just couldn't get the courage to ask for help, even though I knew for about 6 months, man, I don't want to keep doing this, but I just couldn't stop. I did not want to every day. I'm not going to do it today. And then by 10, 11 o'clock, the terror was on and I had to take this away, man. So I did that.
yeah, and you look back too, like, you go from that at 19 and you look back just 9 years earlier when you're 10, 11 years old, just walking through and picking up cigarette butts.
Cigarette butts, drinking little beers at the parties, running around
Yeah,
drinking little beers that were liquor that was sitting around. Like, yeah, and smoking weed at 11,
exactly,
12 years old. This seems harmless, no big deal. The cool kids are doing it. This is what the older kids
exactly,
are doing. And then
exactly.
takes off.
Just full blown right after
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
It just evolves, right? It just continues to evolve. Those things they're slippery slopes, man. There's no joke. That may just be a religious saying, but man, these things are slippery slopes. They're
Well, you,
slippery slopes,
you
man.
just look for the next thing. The next thing, the
Yeah, you
next
look for
thing,
the
the
next
next
better
thing, the
thing
next thing. Yeah. What this is gonna be better.
because
That'll be better. That'll be better.
yep, the highs wear off, and it's like, oh man, getting drunk just doesn't hit the same. Getting high doesn't hit the same.
Mm-hmm.
You know, let's try something hard. Let's try psychedelics, or oh man, psychedelics just
Yep.
don't hit the same. Oh shit, let's go try. What haven't we tried? Oh, cocaine. Oh shit, cocaine doesn't hit the same.
Yep.
Let's hit. Oh shit, what's next? Shit, I guess we're doing needles now, or we're smoking crack or meth or something. And it sucks that it's a natural progression, but it's a natural progression. But it's the evil side of the progression, right? It's exactly what the adversary, if you have a spiritual belief, it's exactly what the adversary Satan wants us to do, wants us to go down the slippery slopes. Let's start here. Let's start. Oh, it's fine. It's harmless. They're good. The other kids are doing it. The other kids are fine. The
Yep.
cool
No big
kids are
deal.
doing it. The cool kids are doing it. Patrick, Joel, Jay, you're fine. Just keep doing it. Oh, the cool kid. Oh, look at the people around you. We're all fine. Look at you. You still have a good job. You're doing fine.
Mm-hmm. You're not
Kind of
hurting
thing. And
anybody. You're not
not
dying.
hurting
No,
anybody.
nobody's dying.
Exactly, exactly. So it's the slippery slopes, man, and it's something that you got to be aware of. If you're already in the throes of it, I invite you to reach out. You can reach out to myself. You can reach out to Patrick. We can help you, find a resource near you. We can help you talk through it to see. Of course, we can't give you professional advice right away, but we can at least be someone that you can talk to, or reach out to someone that you love, that you trust, that you know will be supportive. Right? Reach out to someone, because if you're listening to this and you're hearing this, well, it's probably for this exact reason that you listened for this long into the podcast. And we got here, we're talking about this because someone's going to listen to it. I truly believe that's why we talk about these things, right? We get to
Mm-hmm.
this point, and I truly believe if that's you and you're hearing this and you're like, whoa, oh shit, oh my God, I do have, oh my God. And it's just kind of hitting you right now. And you're just like, you're just kind of having that deer in the headlights kind of stare. Reach out to someone right now. Turn this off. Go reach out to someone. Go message me on Instagram. Go message Patrick on Instagram. Go message your best friend. Message your mom. Message your dad. Go call your, if you have a spouse, call them out. Talk to them right now. Be like, hey, I'm struggling. I am doing this, that, and the other, and I really need help. I think it's okay to ask for help. It doesn't mean anything bad. It doesn't mean anything bad. You don't have to do it alone. You do not have to do it alone. It's okay to be vulnerable.
Can't do it alone.
You can't. No, it's
Can't.
impossible.
It's not going to happen.
Or reach out if you're religious already. Reach out to a pastor. Just reach out to someone. I don't care who. Reach out to someone. Reach out to anyone that you know, you love, and you trust. So, with that, let's see. Is there anything else that you want to mention? We'll get to talk about your website a little bit later here. But is there anything else from the conversation that you want to mention before we get into wrapping this thing up?
I mean, just again, like we just said, like this recovery, sobriety, if that's something you actually need or somebody needs, it's not a lonely person's thing. It's a we thing that happens. It's a community that happens, you know. I always say it takes a village, right? It takes a village.
100%.
It takes a village to help somebody get sober too. It's not because if I could have done it on my own, dang it, I would have done it already by then.
It wouldn't have happened
You
to
can
if
do it
could have
on
done
your
it
own. Yeah, you would have done it on your own by now, right? So if you're kind of sniffing around, do I have a problem? Like, what's going on over here? Like, you know, what's this recovery stuff all about? Like it's probably something you need. It's probably something that's going to be pertinent to you. And again, if it's not recovery, if it's just you know, you're a guy like I was, maybe you don't have any addiction problems, but you're a guy like where I was a couple years ago, and you're just feeling like, you know, I'm worrying all the time. I'm excessively racing thoughts. I'm not sleeping good. I'm eating like crap. I'm not working out. I'm not the, you know, the guy that I thought I would be at this age, whatever that thing is that's missing inside, you know, ask for help, ask somebody, have the courage, because it could be absolutely life changing. You know, my friend says, you got to get to living or you got to get to dying. Like, which one are you going to choose? Like, now's the time to do it. And I think that I believe in my heart, we are best equipped to help the person we once were. So somebody, like you said, is going to hear your voice better than mine, or somebody's going to hear my voice better. Maybe I said the same thing 100 people have said to them, but they're going to hear my voice at that moment, or vice versa. They're going to hear you say it because that's just the way it's supposed to line up. So that's why we keep doing this. We keep doing the podcast and the interviews, and we keep putting the message out there that like you can get better, you can recover from whatever it is. Because again, otherwise it's like, well, why are we doing this? There's millions of podcasts to choose from. There's millions of life coaches to talk to, you know, whatever the case is. It's like, because we all have a voice that somebody's going to hear differently. You know, people told me the same thing over and over again, especially in early recovery. I think I heard this 100 times, but that makes sense right now. It just clicked for
The way
me.
you just said it makes sense.
Yeah.
It could just be the voice. It could be the angle. It could be the approach. It could be the person. It could be the being ready for it. It could be the mindset. It could be so many things, right, that leads to it. And I really encourage, you know, people to share the podcast. If you know someone that's struggling with these things, share this podcast and say, hey, go to minute like 45 or go to minute 40 and just start listening. Listen for the last like 15, 20 minutes of that show. Just go and listen. That's it. That's all I want you to do. If you have someone, a loved one that is struggling with it, you know, you can recognize it, you can see it. Say something to that person. You know, sometimes the person that's in it doesn't realize they're in it, and they need someone that loves and supports them to kind of call them out and to help hold them accountable and be like, hey, Patrick, I didn't want to make this call today. I wanted to call you just to talk to you. But man, you're struggling, huh? I see that you've been drinking a lot lately. Or I see that you've been smoking a lot more than normal. Or I see that you've been out gambling late. You're talking about gambling constantly about sports betting and all this other things. Like, I think you have an addiction, man. Like, I don't want to be the one to tell you it. I don't want it to be like this, but man, I think you have an addiction. And then you could be that one person to the addicted person that, you know, saves them from it, that helps get them out of it. Just because you said something and you took the time to show that you care enough to say something.
Exactly.
So be the person that shows up and shows that they care enough to say something.
Yeah, in a loving, compassionate way, not a pointing fingers, accusatory way, but just, hey, I'm worried about you. I'm concerned. I'm concerned for you.
And there's a big difference. If I just came at Patrick, it's like, Patrick, dude, you have a gambling addiction, bro.
Yeah.
That may work because we're dude to dude, right?
Knock it. Yeah.
Knock that crap off. You need to stop.
Yeah.
That may work, but you know, different people need different approaches. So the best approach is to have an empathetic approach to it. So, all right, Anything else you want to mention, or do you want to get into some fun, lighthearted questions to wrap us up?
Yeah, no, we're good. Yeah, let's have some fun.
All right, let's wrap this thing up. I love to do lighthearted questions at the end because sometimes we get really heavy
Yeah, yeah,
throughout
of
the
course.
conversation, and I like to bring it back down. And someone listening still that they just listen to all that. It's okay. Let's laugh a little bit. Patrick, does pineapple go on pizza?
Yes, I'm a fan of pineapple and pepperoni, pineapple and ham. I like it.
We're gonna end this recording right now.
I know. It's a big. You know what's funny is like I haven't had it in the longest time, but when I was, working in the ER as a nurse, and that would be like a late night order a Domino's pizza or something, and get the Hawaiian
Interesting.
pizza. Yeah,
Huh, cool. Well, if you were a late night ER nurse, it's respectable then.
yeah. Unhealthy
If you,
habits.
that's okay. It's okay. You're working hard. You got to get through the night at that
Yeah,
point. It's
yeah.
late night ER nurse. I mean, hey, do what you got to do to get through the night at that point.
That's a pot of coffee at like 2 or 3 a.m. too. That's so
Yeah,
bad.
no, do what you got to do. Do what you got to do. That's a high demanding job.
Yeah. I think it's like a toss up I with my friends with pineapple. It's definitely like get that away from me, and some are like, yeah, I'm okay with that, or yeah, I love that. So
But then there's very few people that are directly in the middle here that are like, yeah, it can go on yours, but not on mine. Or it can go on mine, but not on yours. That's fine. I'm pretty neutral on it. And I'm like, no, you have to pick a side. You
yeah,
absolutely have to pick a side.
yeah,
There is no middle ground for this discussion. This has just been a long running, like, I don't know, joke of the podcast, but just a long running, like, theme of the podcast. This question, I don't know why. It just
yeah.
always has.
I like it. It's a good one to keep going. Yep.
And I restarted it not too long ago, and I'm like, man, I missed those questions. Second one here, if you could have a dinner party with 3 people, dead or alive, who would you invite to sit at your table?
Oh man, too good, too good. Honestly, the two founders of the recovery program, the 12-step program, I won't mention, just out of traditions. And then I don't know, to be honest, the third one I have to think about.
Okay,
Yeah,
no worries.
yeah.
I typically go with a table. My table, for some reason, always has, like, Ken Griffey Jr. or Jackie Robinson at it.
Okay.
I'm a big baseball dude. I love those 2 dudes so much. I love Jackie Robinson's story, the depth of it, the actual, like, ins and outs of the story. I have a great-great-grandfather who is dubbed the dean of the Negro Leagues, Jey
Okay.
Young. He was, like, he founded, like, to the level to where he founded the first national sports page, the Chicago Tribune. He founded that sports page. And he covered black athletes, boxing, baseball, Negro Leagues, all of it, women's Negro Leagues, all the different things. Very influential in that time. It's an absolute shame that he's not recognized in the Baseball Hall of Fame at all. According to my great great aunt, his sister, um, I don't think she's still alive, but her story was that in the movie 42, there's this scene depicted, right, to where Jackie's talking to his wife, she's like, I don't know if I want to do this anymore, right? What the actual story is behind that is that story still happened, but Faye was actually there too. My great great grandfather was actually there with Jackie, also talked to him and convinced him to continue to play. He's not depicted in that story because it's kind of lost in that record. There's no like official record of it. So Faye was just kind of one of those behind the scenes person. So Jackie Robinson would always be at my table. I love Ken Griffey Jr. Big Mariners fan. I grew up in the Griffey era.
Yeah,
The
yep.
kid, backwards hat, swag. So I always loved those two. And then I typically go sports and things like that, but that's really bad.
That's kind of what I was trying to stay away from because I'm a big sport, especially South Florida sports fan. So
Yeah, yeah. I think this dinner party would be complete for my table. I'm gonna bring Tim Tebow on.
okay.
And did you mention Florida? And that's the only Florida athlete I can think of. And Jameis would be hilarious too. Oh my gosh, Jameis Winston at any dinner party.
You'll be eating the.
Yeah, Jameis Winston's he's a character, dude. He's
Yeah.
he's such a cool dude.
I
I'm
kind
glad
of
he's finally stepping into himself.
I kind of think like I don't know, man, like a thought leader. I mean, like Lincoln, something like that. Like somebody that like a really impactful, influential person, that's been dead a long time. Like somebody like that. Like I want to know where your mindset was, like, doing all bucking against the trend, like doing these things. Like I kind of want to like I'm kind of like intrigued by that.
Yeah, definitely. I would recommend go listen to Bussin' with the Boys, the recent
Okay.
episode they did with Jameis.
Okay.
Kind of goes through his whole story a little bit. It's really interesting. But anyways, I'm gonna wrap this thing up. We're a little bit over here. Uh,
Okay.
Patrick, your journey from self-destruction to self-compassion is proof that men can rewrite their stories. Thank you for being so real, sharing your insights with us, and getting into the weeds with me today. For anyone who wants to break free from self-destructive patterns, connect with Patrick at patrickcaseyjr.com, patrickcaseyjr.com. He's offering a safe space for men to heal, grow, and transform their lives. And as always, remember, you are worthy, you are loved, you are enough, and you are doing a great job. Until next time, stay present, stay engaged, and keep showing up for yourself and for your family.
Thanks, Jay.